This is the new blue post. It came out at this time. Cool. And the changes won't be in until March 5th. What are these changes and are they awesome? I think most of the changes are fantastic. So let's go over them. You'll see that there are these high level bullet points, and then they have the first sentence of most of these paragraphs also says what's going on. So let's check out what the facts are, and then we can check out these subpoints where they explain what their intentions have been long term and why they're putting these changes in. But let's get with the facts first. They're going to double the rate you can level. I think this is great. Look at that right there. That is fantastic. Another thing they're doing is that they're going to make it so that way mount training has been cut in half at level 40. Hey, this makes a lot of sense to me. It really feels bad to not have a mount, and I don't think that this kind of stuff, like trying to have gold sinks in, but when the average player is going to have maybe some gold farming issues, I just let the inflation happen. It's probably inflation will inflate how quickly you can make currency too, even though it's not great because it obviously, helps the RM tiers more than it helps average people. Here's another thing they're saying, it's trying to combat RMT, of course. Just basically saying we want to make it so that way you get more gold from doing things that players generally do and that bots don't. That makes sense to me. They also talk about raid sizing at level 60. You can see down here, they say that they're intending on making the level 50 raid a 20-person experience, and that MC is also going to be a 20-person experience later on when we actually get to the proper level for it. Now, they do talk about the other 40-man raids, and basically what they're saying is that they can't overhaul all this. It's too much work, and also it might not even have a reasonable way to be done. They might have to compromise mechanics that would make it not feel like classic anyways. This makes sense to me. I don't fault them for it. They also go in about their intentions on itemization. You can see right here. What are they basically saying? This is a little bit weird, champ, in my opinion, but it's okay. In my opinion, they're saying they want to keep it like Phase 2 again. They want to have all these off specs be really crazy all the time, but they also have this promise, I'd say, that they're trying to make it a little balanced. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I think that's like kind of stupid because Phase 2 right now isn't very balanced. I don't think it's doing very good. I didn't really want to hear that, but whatever. What else are they talking about? They do want to keep these 20-mans probably as like a catch-up raid. Most of the 20-mans that they're talking about that are new, they're going to be harder, but the older stuff, it's going to be kept pretty easy. They mention here that they want to make it so that way, although there are the 40-mans and they remain approachable, they want to have them be super easy so that way it still feels like classic raiding in 2019. And, I think that sounds like a pretty good idea. They don't talk too much more through here about what they're actually going to do. So let's go and dig into what their explanations are for these changes, because although the changes are pretty good, I think the explanations are super cringe. Let's go to this first one that it bugs me. I don't like how they were always intended to increase the buff, and they just didn't tell us. This is not something that you really like to hear from anybody, that they knew something and they were gonna do it, but they didn't want to tell you. It's odd. I'm not super into it. Or this here saying we don't have any changes planned for the epic mounts at 60 at this time. I mean, this isn't really a big deal. It'll depend on what the economy's like. And then as far as this change here, where you're saying this bonus gold, I mean, we all know what you're trying to do here. Bots probably aren't farming gold out of questing. So if you put more gold there, then that means you shift more of the economic power to legitimate players and you shift it away from illegitimate players, bots, arm tiers, yada, yada, yada. I think this makes sense, but if you just made it so stuff like raids gave more gold, I think that would be a better way of doing it, because still questing for gold isn't really all that fun. It's okay. Now, here's a thing that really bugs me about what they've been saying. You remember how they said they wanted to maintain that soda and pretzels feel of 2019 Classic? Well, what about this? Where you could bring almost any group composition or experience level and have success. This is not true. This is absolutely not true. I'm going to prove it to you. But just think about how upset you'd be if you're in something like, let's say like a math class, and the teacher said things that just made you think that they have no idea what they're talking about. That's how this makes me feel. Let's go over some bosses that I think totally invalidate this idea. What's my favorite one to talk about? 4 Horsemen. Now, if you haven't done 4 Horsemen before in, Classic, this isn't going to make sense to you. But basically, the bottom left guy has an ability where he does like a 40k damage or something, and it's split amongst all the people near him. And this means that when you're rotating your groups between these bosses and four horsemen, you have to make sure that you always keep a certain number of people next to this guy at a time. And that makes rotations weird because you rotate differently in and out of position 1 than you do all the other ones on this boss fight. And that means that these players of 0 experience will die and they will wipe you. Okay, so some people probably say, but Four Horsemen's easy. There's a cheese strat. Let's go into what that cheese strat is in case you're not familiar. Now, remember when I said that the rotation's weird because of this guy? If this guy is not here, then this is super easy. All you have to do to kill the boss then is Zeliek has a chain lightning. Don't have it chain too much. This boss has basically no mechanics. They summon void zones that do like 1,000 damage a second. Don't stand in them. And this boss hits the tank about 50% harder than the other mobs. It's not really a big deal. So when you have just these 3, rotations becomes super duper simple. It's no big deal at all. However, to be able to do it like this, you have to be able to actually Zerg this first guy. And Zerging this is not super simple. You need a very high level of DPS. And there's a ton of raid groups that are only able to actually kill that boss by doing the Zerg. You want to take rep pallies or unexperienced players. Good luck on Four Horsemen. Probably not going to work. But, we can talk about other fights too. Let's talk about maybe Firemaw in BWL. Firemaw. All right. Do you think you're going to be able to make it so all the tanks are viable? Maybe. We're going to have a bunch of really inexperienced tanks tanking these things. Like Firemaw, you need 2 or 3 tanks that actually know the mechanics really well. And if you're a DPS player, you probably think you know the mechanics really well, but let me explain how you probably don't, and you'd kill your raid group if you haven't tanked this boss before. Now, you know that they do a Shadow Breath that hits very hard. So this boss, what are their abilities? It's a one-shot Shadow Breath if you don't have the cloak, one shot. Every 2 seconds, stacks a debuff. So debuff. And the way this debuff works is it basically hits for like 150 times the number of stacks. And it takes 30 seconds to fall off. So this right here means that you have to have tanks rotate. Otherwise, they'll get screwed. If you have a tank that's fire resist capped, they might not have to rotate. And the final thing is that this guy has a threat drop. So threat drop. All right, threat drop. What's fancy about this threat drop? It's a cast ability. So you can't simply wait for the ability to be about to be cast, because what'll happen is that you'll get threat dropped, but the boss will still be taunted on you, and this threat drop pushes. Yeah, sub-mechanic. Pushes, because he's hitting you with his wings. All right? So you can get the boss out of position and kill everybody super quick. This is a fight where you just let your buddy who's never tanked before tank it. They kill 40 people. All right, that's how it goes. They kill 40 people. Maybe your group doesn't have the DPS to do later fights then. You can't play with just anyone. This game is really easy, but the idea that any experience level or any class works is just, it's fantasy. It's not quite that simple. What other raids could we talk about? I mean, there's other things in BWL that are like that, but let's skip to AQ. AQ, all right. So MCs. There's lots of MCs in the game. If you have inexperienced people, MCs are way more lethal because you're idiots. Yeah, so we'll say idiots kill goods. Yeah, that's the thing that'll happen. Your dumb players will kill your good players because your good players will stop hitting stuff when there's MCs, and your idiot players don't pay attention to anything. All right, so if there's any fights where potentially not having everybody world buffed would cause you to not be able to do it, then MCs on trash alone is a real hassle. What about other bosses that have mechanics? You have things like Princess Huhuran. Huhu. You have to have your healers actually assigned to do things that make sense, because this boss does fucking 2k DPS to the 15 closest people, all right? And stacks a fucking debuff on the tank that destroys their ass. You guys ever see a tank die after this fight? It's cringe when it happens, but it does happen. My point being that this idea that anybody can do anything is the spirit of Classic. It's not really true. All right, and I just don't like seeing it because it makes me think they don't play the game. Like, have you ever been in a Nax with like 4 rep pallies? I mean, probably the dumbest group I've ever been in had like 2 rets and like 5 hunters. And that makes it really hard to do shit.